Asian.
He was born in 46, I want to say.
He's been churning out books. And also, this movie was directed by William Girdler. And John, you and I were talking about how this was his last movie, and we kind of wondered why. And Megan found out the answer. Do you want to let him know?
Yeah, he was scouting locations for his 10th movie, so the next one after Manitou. And before Manitou actually had its release, he died in a helicopter crash in the Philippines.
Yeah, his helicopter hit a power line.
Whoa!
While he was scouting locations.
Whoa!
So, yeah, I mean, but this guy made a lot of... You said he made 9 movies before he was 32, John?
He was 30 when he died.
He was 30 when he died.
Yeah. That was why I was so mystified that he didn't have anything after that. I don't think that... I don't even know if IMDb even mentioned his death.
Yeah, so, I mean, but that's prolific right there. 9 movies before 30. And he directed, Grizzly? That was a relatively big film.
Right, and Day of the Animals is a famous one, even though I haven't seen it.
So he was a doer, this guy. I mean, by 30, I wasn't doing that. I was a PA on film sets. I wasn't making movies. But yeah, I don't know, this one, so John, how did you come across this movie?
So I actually came across this movie, I don't know, like 5, 6, 7 years ago at, I think it was at one of our Wizard World conventions, Mark, and there was a table where people were selling, they were selling their horror DVDs, and, some of them are ripped and some of them are legit. And I didn't know any better, but either way, I bought it. Mine turned out to be a rip because it just looks like like you bought a blank DVR disc. But he made a good cover of it. It looks like a legit DVD sleeve, mine.
Nice.
But that's how I watched it for the first time like 6 years ago. And then I watched it twice this week, which might put me among the people who have viewed the Manitou the most who are alive right now. Having seen it now 3 times.
You're in the top 10.
But now what's funny is that I don't remember if I wanted to discuss this for the podcast because it actually crossed my mind or because, as you pointed out, there's actually a Blu-ray release coming out in the near future. I might have seen that and forgotten that, and that might have had it in my head. But it's just an interesting, timely release for this podcast for people to hear about this zany movie when they see the new, Scream Factory release, I think. Is it Screamcast? Scream Factory?
We can look it up during the break, but they seem to be the one doing a lot of these movies right now.
Yeah. And, of the Manitou. And again, this is one of those movies most people haven't even heard of. I'm asking some of my horror savvy friends for listener questions about the Manitou. And they're like, what's that?
And this movie did receive a theatrical release.
Yeah, according to Wikipedia, it said it was a major hit in the theaters.
And it made some money, but I did read a funny review from Roger Ebert. Do you want me to read a quote from his about this movie?
I'm curious to hear what a real reviewer.
All right, so he goes, and then, but hold on a second. Here's yesterday's newspaper. It says here it's July 24. That would make today July 25th, explaining everything. Think back, about this time every summer after all the big summer movies have opened and the big autumn movies are in a holding pattern, and it's either too hot, too windy, too dry, or too wet for civilization to be conducted in a reasonable fashion. We always get movies like this. El Sleazo, Profundo, Trasho, Zilch.
Hey, I think that this movie actually aimed pretty high for what I consider its zaniness, and I even refer to it kind of as a B movie. But when I say that, it's not so much in terms of quality as it is in content. Like just the writing, just the premise of this, just the themes going on, especially what happens in the third act. They feel very B movie to me, executed with a theatrical level of skill.
You know what I noticed is the cinematography was done by Michael Hugo, and he had done lots of TV. So he had done the Octagon and movies before that, and he went on to do almost all of Dynasty and Melrose Place. And while we were watching this movie, Megan and I kind of thought it looked like a soap opera type movie. So this was probably filmed on a budget, and the cinematographer really filmed this. It just looked like a TV show. That's not a bad thing. Especially
with so many scenes taking place in the same doctor's office and an apartment.
But I think they had to shoot quick, and I think this guy was perfect for the job because TV cinematographers have to move so fast. So I did feel that there was a bit of a soap vibe to this show.
You know,
and that's not a bad thing.
Not to discuss the scene right now because it's from later in the movie, but Burgess Meredith is in this movie, and he has a lot of long exposition dialogue cuts where I swear to God he screwed up the lines and they just kept going.
Oh, yeah, because they had him for a day, probably.
Right.
And he was like, listen, I was in Rocky 2 years ago. You're going to film me for a day, then I'm out of here. It's going to be a one shot.
Well, did I read somewhere, do you remember this yesterday? They wrote the screenplay in 3 days.
Yeah, they had to write it real quick, so the guys wrote the screenplay in 3 days for this
I
movie.
have no problem believing that at all.
But we did learn that it did receive several Saturn Award nominations, too, for their makeup. And so I looked up the people who did the makeup, and the guy was Tom Berman. He has been doing so there are people on film sets, they do special effects makeup, and what they'll do is they specialize in cuts and surgery. And this guy had been in Die Hard 2, Goonies, Halloween 3, Howard the Duck, Con Air, but he did Grey's Anatomy, almost every episode of Grey's Anatomy in private practice. And there's a lot of surgery sometimes in those shows. And he'll do the cuts. He'll do the, like incisions. That's his specialty. And he did this movie. And then the special effects guys, Frank Vanderbeer, he worked on, the Dale Tate and Frank Vanderbeer worked on the Waterfront, King Kong, Logan's Run, Flash Gordon, Clash of the Titans, Conan the Barbarian. And then Bill Hansard, one of the guys who did the props on this, did Gremlin, Scarface, Blowout, and Moonraker. So there's a lot of talent behind the camera on this film.
And to clarify for our listeners, when you said King Kong and Clash of the Titans, you meant the 1979 and the 1981 movies.
Yeah, the Jeff Bridges.
Yeah.
King
and
Kong.
the original Clash of the Titans,
Not the 31. That guy's a long timer. But yeah, I mean, so I was really surprised to see the talent behind the camera on this movie.
Yeah, this movie, it aimed high. It aimed really high.
I mean,
it's like Babe Ruth calling his home run with a wiffle ball bat.
Yeah.
Like, the intention is clearly there.
When he swings really hard, that he just gets the ball stuck in the bat. You know?
Right. It just breaks the bat in half, but everyone's still impressed. Well, even though the ball went into the catcher's mitt, everyone's still impressed because he made contact and broke that bat.
That's why I love Shyamalan movies like The Happening or Lady in the Water, because I just felt like he swung for the fences. And the bat may have left his hand and flew through the crowd, but I love that he swung away.
And we've advertised very clearly on the podcast. We both love The Happening for our own reasons. And I'm quite fond of The Lady in the Water. It's just I could only watch it every like 5 years probably. But I like what it tries to do. I like the web of the world that it spins.
It does something different.
And I like that it's fantasy. That's the other thing. I like that it's a weird fantasy.
Oh, I can't wait for Glass.
Yeah, I'm probably going to see that this weekend. Yep.
Oh, man, can't wait for that. So, do we want to jump right into this movie? Kind of talk about the plot?
We can jump right in. So, well, we already talked a little bit, by the way, about Tony Curtis. Are you gonna start in with him?
Well, yeah, I kind of have a theory about this, and we do have a listener question after the break. But I want to talk about. A lot of people were surprised that Tony Curtis was in this movie because he's an Oscar nominee. Some Like It Hot, Spartacus, great movies. However, during this time, he was in movies like The Bad News Bears Go to Japan, Sextet, Some Like It Cool, The Last Tycoon, Lepke. TV movies. He did a one episode of Shaft. The Third Girl from the Left he was in. He was in the ABC Comedy Hour. He was doing Laugh-Ins. He was just doing these movies that weren't very big. So if he did this right after Some Like It Hot, you could understand. But the fact that he's in this movie makes sense due to his filmography at the time.
Sometimes maybe I'm just making this up, but it's like sometimes maybe an actor just wants to do something totally different, and that's what this movie certainly is.
Like it's like how Yui Bowl got all the like Jason Statham and Burt Reynolds and Matthew Lillard and Matthew Madsen, Michelle Rodriguez to be in In the Name of the King. He's like, listen guys, come swing swords and you'll each get $5 million.
Well, but looking back at it, it looks really hokey and cheesy and poorly written. But at the time, it was a big hit. So, I mean, it might not have been as low on the totem pole as we're thinking it is looking back on it.
This could have been a fun time in late July when the theaters weren't too packed. And this is not a demanding movie. And it does offer gore and TNA and, it's a breezy time. It's 90 minutes.
By the way, so this has nudity. We'll get to that later in the episode, but this has nudity, and it's not brief. Let's be clear. It is not brief. It is very clear. I get a lot of boobage in my face for a little bit. And IMDb says this was rated PG.
Well, this was... Oh, wow.
Well, it was the 70s.
Yeah.
That was probably the least of their concerns back then.
I know that the 1968 Romeo and Juliet had plenty, well, not plenty, but one good long view of breasts, and it was rated G or PG at the time or whatever. But that was different. That was romantic and sincere. This is... We'll talk about it later, but I'm surprised this is PG.
So now we know why it made so much money, because 13-year-old kids during summer vacation...
So told their friends, right? They told their, like, Mark, want to go see some boobs?
The end of summer vacation, a bunch of 70s kids were going to the cinema to watch this because it was PG. And the parents were fine with it. I'm going to go watch the Manitou. It's PG. Okay, have fun. You want popcorn? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because the parents were off doing coke somewhere at the disco.
Yeah, they were drinking beer and disco dancing.
And this comment comes with complete lack of us researching it beforehand, but what other horror movies were there in 1977 and 78? Okay, I mean, there were plenty, don't get me wrong, but it's like, there are like 5 or 6 big horror movies from like 77, a couple from 78, including Halloween, which came out later in the year, of course. So it's like, this wasn't a time when people were being peppered. A decade earlier, there were more horror movies coming out, I think, per year than in 1978.
78 had Halloween, Piranha, Jaws 2, which a lot of people don't like, but that was a blockbuster. Invasion of the Body Snatchers. That's a very good... Oh, I Spit on Your Grave. Someone's Watching Me. Stranger in Our House. Dr. Dracula. So, yeah. Magic. Damien, Omen 2. That was actually a really big movie.
Okay, so at least
Faces
6.
of Death.
There were at least 6
yeah.
that I recognize.
And so,
Halloween, Dawn of the Dead.
Oh, The Swarm. Don't you like that movie, John?
No, I don't. I haven't seen it in forever, though. I wasn't impressed with it as a kid. I hardly remember it, though. That was about the killer bee swarm, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was. What a great idea.
But, I saw that before I was studying entomology, too, so maybe I'd appreciate it differently now.
Is that what got you into entomology?
No. It just an accidental elective when I was an accounting major got me into entomology.
Now, in your review for this movie, which is at Movies, Films, and Flicks, and has been a stalwart view-getter for years. It has. You had some issues with about how big this creature grew in such a short period of time, because it did grow 7.3 millimeters per hour.
Right, they were saying the tumor was, yeah. Uh-huh.
So what you were really wondering how big it got, because it had to have been eating thousands of calories.
Well, right. So there is some fast and loose calculations out there, and essentially for a healthy fetus, you're going to average, not every day, because the fetus grows over the course of, gestation, right? It starts out this itty bitty thing and it ends up being maybe a 10-pound thing in my case. But like the average, it's going to go through about 400 calories a day over the course of a 9-month pregnancy in a woman. That's about 77,000 calories. That's what's necessary, not what people actually eat, by the way.
Yeah.
But that's what's necessary for a perfectly healthy development. So to form these complex tissues, right? So, but she's just laying in a hospital. Like, what is she's not in a calorie surplus. Like, so yeah, I was very curious about that. In 34 hours, this thing would have been the size of a basketball. Meanwhile, our hero goes to BFE, middle and nowhere, South Dakota in the middle of the movie. That was either 2 flights and a short drive or 1 flight and a long drive. He was gone for 2 days.
Yeah. And that thing grew that big.
Like, if anything, I think that thing might have grown faster than that, but I'm just wondering how she wasn't a husk of a skeleton, like one of the people who got Life Force sucked in the movie Life Force.
It had to have been just magic.
Movie magic.
Right. And so that's like my current view. Yes, like it's like spiritual energy, maybe, that it was feeding on.
So you're saying there's spiritual calories in the world?
Well, maybe, but either way, it is still using spiritual energy to put together carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus in her body to make something. I want to say that's got to come from somewhere.
Now, Megan and I were talking about this last night, and we want to hear your thoughts. So the creature, the Manitou, is supposed to be a bigger... so we're saying that when they x-ray the Manitou, it stunts its growth, correct? And it hurts him. And that's why it's so mad?
Are we asking what the explanation is for why it was upset?
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't think of that, actually. That's interesting because, yeah, that was a lot of irradiation.
Because they say the laser he was afraid of the laser